Now, let's look at Johnson's defense of Shakespeare. Uh, he primarily defends Shakespeare on his intermingling of the comic and the tragic genres, which was an accusation leveled by contemporary critics against Shakespeare that Shakespeare was, in fact, not um, adhering to classical dictums, and he was wavering from classical dictums, and he was doing uh, what he pleased. He was doing his will. So Johnson, in fact, felt he came up with a very categorical and a very logical defense of Shakespeare's intermingling of tragedy and comedy in his preface to Shakespeare. And he said that Shakespeare was completely justified in bringing together or mixing up the two genres because his plays were a reflection of real life. And in real life, you do not have a life that is completely tragic or a life that is completely joyous and like a cakewalk without any ups and downs. So, real life has a mingling of joy and sorrow, and if Shakespeare was doing it in his plays, there was nothing wrong in it because he was actually borrowing a leaf out of life's book and using it for his play. And he felt that tragic comedy as a new genre, which was popularized by Shakespeare, was much closer to life and much more realistic than a pure tragedy or a pure comedy. And he felt that the interchange of the serious and the gay, the grave and the light, does not weaken the dramatic effect. And in fact, Dr. Johnson strongly believed that the more variety a play has to offer, the more pleasure um, it will give to the audience, the more entertainment value it will have for the audience. And in fact, he regarded Shakespeare highly as a writer of comedy. He felt that it was Shakespeare who had elevated the status of comedy from what it had been so far, because writers of comedy were not really as respected or as highly regarded as writers of tragedy. The real challenge, according to critics and according to viewers also, was in writing tragedy. It was only with uh, Shakespeare's profound works of comedy, like As You Like It and Twelfth Night and Midsummer Night's Dream, that comedy also started being considered as a genre um, worth literary attention and critical attention. So, why did Johnson think so highly of Shakespeare's comedy? Because he thought that Shakespeare's language of comedy, the language that he used in his plays, was like real life. It was neither gross nor was it over refined. It was not artificial. It was, in fact, just as it should be or just as it happens in real life. And to quote Dr. Johnson himself, uh, in his opinion, when he speaks about Shakespeare, he says that his tragedy seems to be skill, his comedy to be instinct. So he attributed greater credit to Shakespeare for his comedies than for his tragedies. And he also gave Shakespeare a lot of credit for perfecting the English blank verse, and also for introducing both dialogue and character in a very prominent way, which was not the tradition so far in plays. In plays, so far, it was the narrative technique and the plot that had been foregrounded by writers and playwrights all along. But with Shakespeare, more focus, more emphasis started being given to the human character and human nature and the interaction between characters. So, this is how Dr. Johnson builds a very strong defense of Shakespeare and his practice of mixing tragedy and comedy.